Unfortunately, the Lehigh Valley has a very real drug problem, just like any area in the country and in Pennsylvania at this time. There's no town that's exempt. Drugs can be found in every town across the country and every town in Pennsylvania at this time.
They need to know what is going to happen if they get involved with them. That is the most important thing. And it has to be that hard, fast hitting exactly what's going to happen. I think the most important thing is when you talk to people who have gotten involved and are trying to get off them, and they have to do that straight talk.
All drugs are available in the Lehigh Valley, but recently, in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge increase in heroin, methamphetamine, and prescription medications, as well as your synthetic drugs, your synthetic marijuana, your bath salts, and a slight decline in cocaine. Because unlike in the 80s and the 90s, there is no longer a stereotypical drug user. Drug abuse crosses all socioeconomic and demographic boundaries like we've never seen before. It's no longer an inner city problem. It's no longer a problem amongst certain races, certain backgrounds. It's everywhere. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I want to thank everybody for coming to this presentation. Just the fact that you guys are taking time out shows that you guys understand that this is a serious problem and you want to learn about it in order to prevent it from coming into your homes. I also want to thank the Parkland School District because when I emailed the superintendent, he jumped on this presentation immediately. So the fact that they are willing to put this out there for you guys to educate everybody is a big deal. Again, my name is Dahlia Van Fleet, and I'm an intel analyst with the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, which is the DEA. We're a federal agency. We target large-scale drug trafficking organizations. I've been an intel analyst since 1999. I started in the Philadelphia Divisional Office, and I transferred up to Allentown in the summer of 2005, and I've been in our Allentown resident office since that time. Part of my job is to help investigate large-scale narcotic trafficking organizations. We try to dismantle them at the local, state, national, and international level. Essentially, it's kind of like what you would typically think of the enforcement side on TV. Not really as glamorous, but similar. So we're attacking the supply side when we talk about the enforcement side. When we come out and we do stuff like this, we're trying to attack the demand side, because without a demand, there would be no supply. Again, I'm glad that you guys are here. That means that you guys understand if there's a problem, you want to prevent it from coming into your homes, and that's important. As law enforcement, we come out, we try to educate people. Why? Because in the most basic sense, our job is to keep people safe. It's to keep people alive. And one way to do that is to educate you. So before you leave tonight, this is what I want to achieve. These are our goals. I want you to know what drugs are available. I want you to know what your kids are exposed to every day that we may not be aware of, because a lot has changed since we've all been in high school or middle school. I want you to know what behavioral changes and what symptoms to look for. Know what your resources are, both at the school level, the county level, the state level, on the internet. There's a lot of resources available. I'm definitely going to try to convince you that the "not my kid" is a myth. And I want you to know more than your kids when you leave here tonight. Why this presentation specifically targets middle school and high school parents. Because as you can see, 90% of people that don't use an illegal substance before the age of 18 will never start. 9 out of 10 addicts started using an illegal substance before the age of 18. So we want to get these kids to the age of 18, hopefully not using drugs, and then hopefully they never start. Another reason is because using addictive substances during adolescence increases the risk of addiction, suicide, homicide. It lowers academic performance, and it also causes serious health conditions. Not only that, we all know that teenagers are more likely to take risks than adults. They're more likely to experiment with the drugs, the alcohol, than adults. We all know that when we were high school kids, we might have done stuff that we probably would not do today. These are the myths of drug abuse, that drugs are an inner city problem. This might have been the case when we were in high school in the 80s, even the early 90s. You had to go into inner cities to find drugs. This is not the case today. Any one of us could go to any town in Pennsylvania and find drugs. It would not take us long to figure out who to go to buy drugs. It's everywhere. No matter where you live, it's everywhere. Again, there is no longer the stereotypical drug user. You're not talking about somebody strung out in an alley with a needle in their arm. Drug abuse crosses all socioeconomical, cultural, and geographic boundaries. And the myth, my kid is blank and would never use drugs. My kid's an athlete. My kid is an honor student. My kid is part of the government. My kid goes to church every week. My kid's popular. They would never touch drugs. That's not the case. They are exposed to a lot more than we ever were. Between the internet and their friends, it's easily accessible and it's out there. I want to give a quick example. The Pittsburgh office, we have an office out in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has been experiencing a huge spike in heroin overdoses since the summer of 2015. I was asked to assist our Pittsburgh office on a case, going through some of the overdoses, the overdose deaths. Came across one of a 19-year-old boy. He had just graduated high school in May. He wakes up one morning, goes out, walks his dog, has breakfast with mom and dad and his little brother. Mom and dad take his little brother to a soccer game. Come back around noon. They're going to get ready to go to a family picnic. Mom's yelling upstairs for him. He's not answering. He's not answering. She goes upstairs. She knocks on the bedroom door. He's not answering. She opens the door. He's dead on the floor with a needle next to him and heroin bags next to him. This was a white boy in an upper middle class family. He was going to college in the fall. He was a football player. He was homecoming king, and he was an honor student. And mom and dad said they had no idea that he was using heroin. So his friends knew, but mom and dad had no idea. These are just some general drug facts. 86% of high school students know somebody, know a classmate who drinks, uses drugs, or smokes during the school day. Not just at a party on the weekend, they're doing it in school, before school, on school property. 44% of teens know students that are selling drugs in school. And again, out in Pittsburgh, there were definitely kids in those high schools selling drugs. And unfortunately, it's everywhere. It's probably in every high school in the state. 45% of teens have seen pictures of other classmates, either drunk, using drugs, or passed out. And the scarier part of that is that 60% of the students that were interviewed thought that it looked cool, or like the kids in the pictures were having fun. This is just how we've gotten to where we're at today. The drug trends have obviously changed. I know they've changed significantly since I started working for DEA. In the 60s and 70s, the big drugs out there was the marijuana, it was the psychedelics, your acid, your LSD, your PCP. In the 80s, we had the huge crack, it was the big crack cocaine epidemic. That was during the Ronald Reagan years. If everyone recalls the Just Say No to Drugs campaign, where Nancy Reagan just had all the media blast, the public service announcements, just say no to drugs, wear red to show that you are against drug use. In the 90s came methamphetamine and ecstasy. The methamphetamine in the 90s was methamphetamine where you had to go into the store, you buy the Sudafed, they extract the pseudoephedrine out of it, and they make it in homemade labs. We didn't see such a problem in this area, but in other parts of the country, it was rampant. In the 2000s, it was, again, methamphetamine, but now it was no longer the stuff made locally in these labs that you always heard about blowing up or exploding because it's so dangerous to make. Now we had the huge super labs in Mexico where they could make a lot more and they could just ship it over here and it's actually cheaper. And the opioids. And by opioids, I'm talking about your prescription painkillers, your Oxycontin, your Vicodin, your oxycodones, your hydrocodones, your fentanyl. In 2010, we had the heroin problem, 2010 to the present, and synthetic drugs. The heroin, we still have the prescription drug problem. However, the prescription opioids lead to heroin use, because once your supply of prescription drugs dries up, you're gonna go to illegal drugs. You're gonna go to the heroin, you're gonna find it on the street, because you don't have a source anymore. So here's what we're gonna talk about tonight. I want to focus on the drugs that your kids are going to be most exposed to. So we're going to talk about prescription pills. We're going to talk about synthetic drugs. We're going to talk about marijuana, and we're going to talk about heroin. So as I'm going, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand so you don't forget the question by the end. And chances are, if you have that question, somebody else in here is thinking the same thing. And if I don't have an answer for you, there's some other people in here that could possibly answer it for you. And if we don't know, I'll get back to you on it. So we have prescription drugs. That's what we're going to start with. Okay. How did we get where we are today? This is a fantastic article, The Truth Behind America's Pain Pill. In as late as the 90s, it was not a normal medical practice for a doctor to prescribe an opioid or a pain medication for somebody because of chronic pain. You either had to have cancer or be terminally ill. A survey done in 1992 amongst physicians showed that only 12% of physicians believed that prescribing an opioid for chronic pain was lawful and acceptable. So 90% of physicians basically figured, deal with it, you're a little uncomfortable, you'll get through it. We shouldn't be giving you all this medication. So where was the shift? What happened? Why are we where we're at today? It's a two-pronged answer to that. The first part, in the early 2000s, there was a big push by the pharmaceutical companies amongst the doctors. We all know pharmaceutical companies are very powerful, they lobby. They go to the doctors, they're telling them, we make all these pills. Why are you allowing your patients to suffer when we make pills that would make them feel better? You should prescribe them. And they pushed, and they pushed. Now, why did the pharmaceutical companies want to do this? Money. That's honestly what it boils down to, is that they wanted to make money. Was it their intent to get people addicted to pain medication? No. But the reality is that that is what happened. The second part of the problem came, there was a cultural shift. Society as a whole had a different outlook on pain medications. One, if my doctor is willing to prescribe it, it can't be bad, it can't hurt me. And it was not the doctor's intent to harm anybody or create addicts, but that's what happened. And people basically said, if there's a pill, why should I be uncomfortable? Why should I suffer? I could just take this pill and I'll be okay. In reality, what happened? They became addicted. The problem is that the worst drug epidemic we've ever faced in this country came out of a legitimate healthcare system. And that's the reality of it. So 52 million people over the age of 12 have admitted to using prescription drugs non-medically. What do I mean when I say non-medically? You're using a prescription medication in a manner not for which it was prescribed. You're using more than you should. You're using it more often than you should. You're using greater quantities. It's not your prescription, or you're using it for something other than it was prescribed. 1 in 6 teens have admitted to using prescription medication to getting high, to help them get high. 27% of teens and 16% of parents believe that prescription medication is safer than street drugs. And the only slight truth to that is that there is quality control because they're made by pharmacies. But other than that, when you're not using a prescription that's yours or in the manner in which it was prescribed or you're addicted, it's just as dangerous as any street drug out there. So in order to understand the severity of the prescription drug problem, I just want to read to you a few statistics. Again, I'm not going to overwhelm you with statistics because I'm trying to convince you that there's a problem because you're here, you understand that there's a problem out there. But I just want to hit home the severity of this problem. Every day in the United States, 2,500 youths aged 12 to 17 have used prescription pain relievers for the first time. Prescription drugs are responsible for more overdoses in the United States than street drugs. 50% of teenagers believe that prescription drugs are safer than illegal drugs. 60 to 70% of teenagers say that home medicine cabinets are their source for drugs. Teens who use prescription drugs are twice as likely to use alcohol, 5 times more likely to use marijuana, and 12 to 20 times more likely to use illegal street drugs such as heroin, ecstasy, cocaine than teens who don't. In the United States, 44 people die as a result of prescription overdoses every day. More than 1,600 teens begin abusing prescription drugs daily. And after marijuana and alcohol, the most common drugs abused by teens are prescription medications. So right there, those statistics show you how severe this problem is. Why prescription medications? Well, easy access. They're in mom and dad's medicine cabinet. They're in somebody's purse. You're over your friend's house. They're in their parents' medicine cabinet. There's less of a stigma attached to using prescription medication. They think it's legal, even though if it's not your prescription, it's not legal to use. It's safer. Again, there's less shame to it. So those are just some of the reasons why younger people have admitted that they use some of these prescription medications. This slide shows you some of the most frequently abused prescription medications. The top shows you it's your opioids. Your oxycodone, your oxycontin, your hydrocodone, your fentanyl, your Vicodins. The most popular, your oxycontin, your oxy 30s and oxy 20s. They used to be oxy 80s, but when the pharmaceutical companies changed the compound, they can't be crushed and snorted, so now they do oxy 30s. You have your stimulants, your Adderall, your Ritalin, and then you have your benzos, your Xanax, your Valium, your anti-anxieties. The website at the bottom, I hope you can all see. If by some chance you come across a pill and you don't know what it is, you can go to that website, take the pill, and try to match it up. It can show you generic brands, and it can show you name brand drugs. So this way, and it will tell you what those drugs do. Where are kids getting the drugs? More than 50% are getting them free from a friend or a relative. We just leave our prescription drugs out there. We're done using the prescription, we don't dispose of it. About 18% had it legitimately prescribed by a doctor, but then it led to addiction. Fewer and fewer are actually going and getting them on the street. So what should you do? You have prescription medication left over. Don't flush them. As we all know, it can get to the water supply, and that's pretty dangerous. Lock up any prescription medications. There are people that need legitimately to take a prescription painkiller. Lock it up. It may not be your child coming into your medicine cabinet and taking it, but it could be your child's friend. It could be the lady that cleans your house or the man that cleans your house. It could be the person in your house who's doing work, who's painting. An addict is going to find any source they can, and medicine cabinets are a great source. And how many of us would honestly notice if 1 or 2 pills was missing? Probably not many. So please, if you have them, keep them locked up. Limit unnecessary prescriptions. If you go to the doctor and he prescribes a pain medication, you don't need to fill it right away. Because first of all, if you fill it, you're going to be very tempted to use it. Even when an over-the-counter medication such as Motrin or Advil might work. But we're so used to just going right to what the doctor prescribed. Better yet, don't even take the prescription from the doctor. If by some chance you determine, I'm in so much pain, I need to have this pain medication, call your doctor and have him call it into the pharmacy. Also be aware of what your kids are using. Your child has their wisdom teeth out. Realistically, do they need 30 Vicodin? Probably not. We've all had our wisdom teeth out. I think I was taking Motrin. And finally, when you do dispose of them, don't leave unused prescription medication in the house. Dispose of it, because that's when you get into people using it for things it's not supposed to be used for. The Vicodin left over from your son or daughter's wisdom teeth surgery, well now I've been doing gardening, my back hurts, maybe I'll just take one of those. It wasn't prescribed to you. Dispose of it properly. DEA does 2 national takebacks a year, and coincidentally the next one is April 30th. If you go to dea.gov, you can see where the closest location is for you. You take all prescription medications. Or Pennsylvania, the website listed, has 250 permanent drop boxes, mostly at police stations, which you can take your prescription medications there, drop them off. If you go to that website, type in your zip code, it will tell you where the closest one is to you. Are there any questions on prescription medication? Okay. Next, we want to talk about synthetic drugs. And this is probably the part of the presentation that you will all know the least about, just because it's fairly new. It's not even 10 years old. We started to see prescription drugs hit the United States, synthetic drugs hit the United States in 2009 and 2010. They were in Europe a few years prior to that, and then they made their way over here. What are synthetic drugs? Drugs produced in clandestine laboratories, and I say that in quotes, by trained or untrained chemists. Laboratory. We're not talking about a sterile environment. We are not talking about what you would normally picture in a hospital or in a research center. You're talking about unsanitary conditions, unsterile conditions. It could be a shed. It could be a burned out apartment. It could be a trailer. It could be a cement mixer as a lab. It could be a hot plate and a pot. That's what we're talking about. And by chemist, it's not somebody that graduated college with a degree in chemistry. It's somebody that looked up a recipe on the internet. With that being said, there's obviously no quality control. We have no idea what they're putting into this stuff. We don't know how much of everything they're putting into it. You're going to hear me say that over and over about the synthetic drugs. It's a quality control issue. You have no idea what's in there. The most popular types, your cannabinoids. That's when you hear people talking about your synthetic marijuana. I want to be clear, it's not marijuana at all. It's a chemical sprayed onto plant matter, onto plant material to look like marijuana. The only similarity is that it attaches to the same brain receptors that marijuana does. However, it's so much more powerful and intense that the effects are that much more potent and dangerous. That's your K2, your spice. Then you have your cathinones, which are your bath salts, your flocka, and your molly. We didn't see a lot of flocka up here. There's a lot more down in Florida and other places. And then you have your MDMA and your ecstasy. How are they made? These chemicals are all made in labs in China. And again, when I say the term lab, I am not talking about a sterile environment. I'm talking about an unsterile, unsanitary place. And then they're shipped to the United States to be packaged and for production and packaging. These chemicals are not illegal in China. The Chinese government has made last year I think they made about 100 of them illegal, but there's thousands of them out there. So every time they make one illegal, they change the chemical compound just a little bit, and now it's not illegal anymore. So basically they made one chemical illegal, so now they started mixing it with something else. That's how they get around it. These chemicals are shipped through countries in Europe to the United States. So they don't come here with a Chinese mailing label, because that would raise all sorts of red flags for us. They're shipped through countries in Europe, and they eventually get here. They're shipped in items, bath salts, something you throw in what you think throw in your bathtub to take a bath. Potpourri, incense. That's how they're shipped here. So they try to avoid law enforcement detection. How are they made once they're here? K2 and spice comes over in a crystal or a powder form. They dissolve it and they spray it on the plant matter. Again, that's why they call it synthetic marijuana, even though, again, there's no plant material in there, and it is a lot more potent than marijuana. Your bath salts and your flocka look like crystals. Your MDMA, that comes from the Netherlands and Belgium. That's not made in China. Those are in tablet form, it comes from Europe, mostly the Netherlands and Belgium. Molly was actually developed as supposed to be a very potent form of MDMA, but it's actually a cathinone with similar effects as the bath salts and the flocka. They're not expensive. If you want to buy some, it's $10 or $20. In order to buy a kilogram of the spice or the K2, a kilogram of the chemicals to make K2 or spice costs about $3,000 from China. However, once it's dissolved and sprayed onto the plant matter, the profit potential is $250,000. So it shows you that there's a lot of money out there being made from this. What do? Again, the synthetic cannabinoids, they mimic marijuana. They relax you. They make you mellow. But again, they attach in such an intense way that it has a stronger and a more dangerous effect. It was originally created as a legal alternative to marijuana, but now they are illegal. Your synthetic cathinones and MDMA, they're stimulants. They're uppers. They want to give you a jolt of energy. They're designed to mimic cocaine, methamphetamine, LSD. What do they look like? Those are your bath salts. That's K2, bath salt, K2, and K2. If you look at the packaging, it's very colorful. A lot of times they'll have cartoons on them with catchy names. They're geared towards younger people. They're geared towards adolescents. You know, the one that even says barely legal. They're labeled as potpourri. So it doesn't even seem like it's illegal. It's very attractive to the younger generation. That's who they're targeting. How are they used? They're smoked and they're snorted. Where can they be purchased? Convenience stores, head shops, through the mail, on the internet. The first picture, the K2 Smokes and Gifts, is I guess you'd call it a convenience store, bodega up in New York City, prior to these chemicals being controlled. You could walk right in there and buy it. Now that these chemicals are controlled, a lot of these convenience stores still have it. You just have to know who to ask and where to ask and what to ask for. However, your children would probably get it online. I don't know how well you can see this slide, but buy K2 incense. That's how they're selling it. It's not a drug, it's incense, and they label it not for human consumption. That gets them around the intent part of the law. They're selling it to you, but they don't know what you're using it for. No, we sold it to you to make your house smell nice. No, they didn't. You can even see there's a customer service representative up there. They take major credit cards, they take PayPal, they take normal forms of payment that any retail store would take. The scary part about these, you see Bizarro up there. You could buy 2 bags of that and have vastly different chemical components in there. So one bag might make you react this way, the other bag might make you react another way, because all this stuff are just a bunch of chemicals thrown in a bag. That's all it is, and again, there's no quality control. You have no idea what you're ingesting. So your son or daughter might be like, oh, well, my girlfriend or my friend over there bought this particular type of K2. I'm gonna get the same one because they were fine. Well, one kid walks away fine, the other kid winds up on a ventilator. You just don't know what you're getting. These are some of the side effects: high blood pressure, faster heartbeat, vomiting, heart attack, causes all sorts of respiratory problems, hallucinations. The effects vary drastically depending on pre-existing medical conditions, other combinations of drugs that you've taken, alcohol. So 2 people that take the exact same drug could have vastly different effects. And that makes it extremely difficult to treat. The medical community has no idea how to treat it. Again, because 2 people react so differently to these drugs and they don't know what's in them. So they don't know how to treat them. Are they illegal? Absolutely. They are illegal. However, they are extremely difficult to prosecute. Why? Because they label them not for human consumption. So now we just got around the intent part of the law. They changed the chemical components in them. So now all of a sudden that chemical isn't scheduled. And unfortunately the manufacturers are all overseas, they're all in China. And obviously we are not extraditing from China to prosecute somebody here. MDMA and ecstasy, it originally was developed in the 1960s as a psychotherapy medication. However, they found out that it had all these crazy side effects: depression, confusion, anxiety, paranoia, psychotic behavior. It is still seen at some parties, raves, stuff like that, but it is a Schedule I drug. It has no legitimate medical use at this time. What does it look like? It can look like that, different colors. Why are synthetic drugs so dangerous? Well, one, people don't know a lot about them. So that makes it extremely dangerous. Again, it bonds to your brain receptors in such an intense way that the effects are extremely powerful. There's no quality control in the manufacturing. We have no idea what's in those bags. We have no idea what chemicals they are. We have no idea how much of the chemicals are in there. Again, everyone reacts differently. We spoke about that a couple minutes ago. The different effects it has on everybody, depending on your pre-existing medical conditions, what other drugs you've taken, if you're taking it in conjunction with alcohol. And that goes into the drug interactions. These are just some headlines from around Pennsylvania, other than the top one about Wesleyan University. So if we don't think that they're in Pennsylvania, they are. Earlier this year, Allentown, one weekend they were flooded with overdoses, 60 to 70 in one weekend. And the police couldn't keep up with them. There were people running around the streets naked, and they were hallucinating. They were hanging from trees. People wound up having heart attacks on respirators. The hospitals are calling us, asking us, what can we look for? And honestly, we don't know what to tell them because we don't know what's in those bags. But it's everywhere. Is there a question?
Yes.
Okay.
That synthetic drug, is that like acid? Like LSD?
No, synthetic drugs are a chemical. It's a chemical sprayed onto plant matter or made into crystals. So it's more of a chemical than like your typical hallucinogens, like your LSD, your PCPs. But it will make you hallucinate. That is one of the side effects. Absolutely. Are there any other questions on synthetic drugs? Okay, heroin. Why is everybody talking about heroin? Well, everyone's talking about it because there's been a huge increase in demand, a huge increase in supply. It is highly addictive, and there's been a huge spike in overdoses and overdose-related deaths in recent years. So it's pretty straightforward. We're in an epidemic right now. Availability. Heroin has saturated the market. When I first started 16 years ago, you didn't see much heroin. It was very expensive. You just didn't see a lot of it. Between 2010 and 2014, the seizures made by law enforcement has increased by 81%, and it's probably even higher now. I would love to sit up here and tell you it's because we're doing a great job, we've changed our tactics, we're on it. The bottom line is there's just that much more out there. We've probably seized in this area the majority, more heroin in the last 3 years than I think I'd seen in the previous 13 in working. It's out there, it's everywhere. The demand has increased. Part of that is because of the pill problem. Basically, if you become addicted to an opioid, you have two choices. You either go to rehab or you switch to heroin, because you're not going to kick an opioid addiction by yourself. That's the bottom line. So once your pill source has dried up, you can't get it from mom and dad anymore, you can't steal it from friends, your doctor will no longer write you the prescription. Either you go to rehab or you have to start using heroin. That's why we see that the largest age group of new users is ages 18 to 30. And overdoses has tripled between 2010 and 2013. And it's probably even higher now. Specifically in Pennsylvania, heroin is a nationwide problem. It's in every state, it's in every town. Pennsylvania is kind of, I don't want to say unique, but we have a lot of heroin in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of very pure heroin in Pennsylvania, and we have a lot of very cheap heroin in Pennsylvania. That's not the case everywhere, but that's the problem that we're facing. As you can see, it's the #1 cause of fatal overdoses in counties surrounding Philadelphia. Heroin can be purchased for about $10 a bag in any town in Pennsylvania. That being said, you're addicted to a prescription opioid, you're addicted to an Oxy 30. You're paying $30 for one pill, 1 unit. Now all of a sudden you can't get it anymore, you switch to heroin, it's $10. Let's do the math, and the high is that much better. The high is probably 10 times better with heroin as opposed to an Oxy 30. And then part of the problem with addicts is they're always going to chase that first high. You've probably heard the term chasing the dragon. That's what they're looking for. They're looking to find that first high. And addicts are very interesting individuals. Again, the case in Pittsburgh, recently they've had more overdoses associated with a particular brand name or stamp. Heroin dealers use little bags like this, and they usually stamp them so you know whose stuff it is. Addicts, if they find out that this one is stamped Rock Nation, they find out Rock Nation killed somebody, every addict in the city will be looking for that heroin because they want that high. If somebody overdosed and died, that means that heroin is really good. So in Pittsburgh, recently, we had overdoses associated with a particular stamp. And the U.S. Attorney's Office wanted to put on a presentation about it. And we disagreed a little bit because we know that that's what the addicts are going to do. They look at it like they're warning them. We look at it like, no. Every addict is going to run and try to find that, where most people would go in the other direction. Fentanyl is now used in conjunction with heroin. Fentanyl is more powerful than morphine, but they're adding it to heroin, which is already extremely pure, which is leading to overdoses. We found it in the toxicology of overdose victims and in the bags. It's deadly. And again, you're having people add it. There's no quality control. They don't know how much they're adding. And people are literally dying immediately. Is there a question?
I'm just thinking if Pennsylvania has the highest purity, so do we know where that's coming from versus other parts of the country? Or we have no idea?
No, we do know where it's coming from. It's coming, pretty much most of the heroin we're seeing in Pennsylvania is coming in from Mexico. But it's coming directly to Pennsylvania as opposed to going to other locations, being broken down, stomped on, or whatever you want to call it, cut with something. It's coming directly here. So we do know where it's coming from. Yeah. It's everywhere. I mean, I guarantee it's in almost every high school in this state. I would guarantee it's in every high school in the state. It's everywhere. It's amongst people that you would have no idea. Any one of us could probably go into any town tomorrow and figure out pretty easily where to find it.
Are they seeing it in the middle school?
We have not seen it as much in the middle schools. Pat, I don't know if you, no. We've not seen it as much in the middle schools, but I know in the high schools we definitely have. I know in Pittsburgh that was a huge problem, was there were dealers right in the high school selling it every day.
Where are they getting the fentanyl from?
Fentanyl is now being manufactured in Mexico and shipped over. Prior to that, they were taking it off the fentanyl patches and stuff like that, but now we're actually seeing it come in, and they're selling that in and of itself to use as cut with the heroin. Yes?
How can I tell if my kid has drugs aside from standard teenage hormonal fluctuations? How do I know if he's using?
Well, a lot of it is major behavioral changes. You know, we all know that they have mood swings, we all do, but behavioral changes, dropping in grades, hanging out with a different group of friends. Do they have risk factors? Were they ever prescribed a pain medication for a legitimate reason? Then just know, be aware, is there money missing from your household that you're aware of? Sleeping a lot, are they not taking care of themselves, like hygiene-wise? All just major changes in behavior that would have you raise an eyebrow would be the first thing to do. Know who their friends are, if they're hanging out with a different crowd, stuff like that. I actually meant to say something earlier. Last month, the CDC came out with prescribing guidelines for the first time in history because of this problem. These prescribing guidelines are now being taught at medical schools and amongst the medical community. And it's basically telling them when should you be prescribing an opioid as opposed to an over-the-counter medication. It's not just intended to keep them comfortable. It's for, you know, terminal illness, people in severe pain. So that was one of the things that the CDC has done, which we've never seen that before. Unfortunately, it's taken us years to get here, and it's not going to turn around overnight. As far as the pharmaceutical companies, Pat, I don't know if you...
Yeah, I don't know if I can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, hi. My name is Patrick Trainer. I'm a special agent with the DEA out of Philadelphia. I work at the Philadelphia office. I started with Dahlia a very long time ago. Can I borrow your perhaps? Thanks. This is better? Okay. To the gentleman's point, one of the things we're doing at DEA is we license all of the doctors and all the pharmacists to prescribe this medication. You'll notice on your prescriptions, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, there's a DEA number. So the question you're asking hits it right on the head. We have regulated the pharmaceutical industry for a long time, but we've had a very confrontational relationship with them. We have fined Purdue Pharma millions and millions of dollars because, to your point, we thought they were probably the largest drug dealers in the country. We're talking with doctors. DEA, we host a pharmacy diversion awareness conference, or actually we're talking with pharmacists, and we're increasingly going out to medical schools. Any doctors here? Any doctors in the audience? How much training did you get to prescribe?
I mean, we don't get, we know that there is a risk, but I'll be honest, the companies like Jayco comes in,
Right.
and one of the things that they do is they actually ask us patients to rate their pain.
Right.
Because we're also told that patients are supposed to be comfortable.
Correct. Correct.
Knowing that if it goes against us, they're not treating their pain adequately.
Correct. But how long is med school?
So 4 years.
4 years, and plus your, okay, so about 7 years total?
So it depends on the residency.
Okay.
4 years plus your residency, which could be 3 to 7 years.
Okay, 7 years. All right, we've talked to a few doctors. Any idea how much time they spend being taught how to prescribe? Any guesses? 4 hours. 4 hours. You know who gets more prescription training? Veterinarians. Okay? So DEA is out constantly talking to pharmacists, talking to doctors, talking to medical schools to tell them about the lake that Dahlia is telling them about. Because they don't know. They just don't know.
I'm pretty loud, so I'll just say my question. Is there a way to report a physician that we find out has a practice of really misprescribing opioids and other medication? I mean, I work at the mental health and substance abuse field, and we do hear about, oh, there's a doctor in Center City who will just see people as basically a prescription farm. And is there any way to like go online and just kind of report that somehow?
Yeah, there are 3 ways, and I'll tell you, we actually have some information about it. We have the DEA website where you can report it. We have a text line where it's tip 411, okay? And you can also call us. There are approximately 70, just to give you an idea, in Pennsylvania alone, you may know this, but there are 76,000 registrants in Pennsylvania. When I say registrants, I mean people who are licensed to prescribe these medicines. If 1% of them goes off the reservation, 1%, that's more than any of us can handle. Last year, we locked up 63 doctors on federal drug charges. Federal drug charges, okay? It's not to say that people who have a legitimate need to get opioid medication shouldn't receive it, but we have seen numerous doctors in the Philadelphia area that their whole practice is designed to basically prescribe this medication. We refer to them as pill mills. So yeah, there's about 3 different ways you can report them, and we get a lot of information. So we would encourage you to do so.
Any other questions? Yes.
How are they ingesting this powder? Are they like snorting it or shooting it, or what are they doing with it?
Heroin?
Yeah.
Normally, you'll start by snorting it. Most, I would say 100% of addicts will eventually start shooting it. So they start snorting it. That's why there's not the stigma that there used to be with heroin. Like when we were younger, you saw somebody strung out, and you always pictured them with a needle in their arm. They don't have to do that now. It's not as dirty, it's not as gross. I can snort it, but eventually you're going to start shooting it. It's just the way it is. By that point, they're they're so far gone that they need to get to rehab. Anyone else? This is a drug user blog. I don't know if you probably can't see it. The title is How to Score on the Street. There's a ton of these blogs out there, and we do kind of snoop around. We look, we try to monitor them just to see what's going on, to gather the intelligence. I'll read this to you, but this is written by a teenager who's trying to make the leap from prescription medication to heroin, either because his source dried up and he can't get it anymore. So now he's looking to buy heroin, and he's asking people for advice. He basically says, I don't want sources, nor do I want people telling me not to do this. I went down to a couple of supposed hotspots today and dressed like a junkie and trolled around looking for some gear. I've never had to do this before. I don't want to get stabbed or blanked over. Just looking for some advice. What's the best approach? Do you go up to people and ask them? If so, what people? How do you ask them? Are train stations good places to try this, or is that a myth? I'm going to find some anyway, so just help me do it safely. Thanks. Okay, there was about 30 to 40 responses to this question online. And not one person said don't do it. Not one person said go to rehab. Not one person said don't make that jump. They all gave him advice on where to go, how to do it. In Pennsylvania, we have the Good Samaritan law, which basically says if you're with somebody and they overdose, if you call 911 and you stay with them, you cannot be charged if you have drugs in your system or drugs on your person. But you have to stay and you have to call. The reason why Pennsylvania passed this law was because people are with their friend and they're overdosing, well, they don't want to get arrested, so they leave them and the person dies. So they passed this Good Samaritan law. We also have the naloxone laws. Naloxone is also known as Narcan. It reverses the effects of heroin. The naloxone laws made it legal, gave naloxone to law enforcement, not just EMS. Prior to this, it was only EMS. And it made it legal for private citizens to get Narcan with a prescription. Governor Wolf passed a law not too long ago that said that every high school in the state can have Narcan. Just let me go back to that. And also the Pennsylvania Physicians General also passed a standing order saying that any private citizen can go into any pharmacy and get Narcan without a prescription. That being said, I think law enforcement has mixed feelings about Narcan because it's now a safety net. Addicts now think, well, I can use heroin and I don't have to worry about dying because they can, put the mist up my nose or put the IV in my arm and I'll be okay. So there's not that fear of overdosing anymore. But the bottom line is, sometimes people get there too late and they can't use it and the person dies. Okay, what can you do? Stop the problem before it starts. This again goes back to the pill issue. Monitor any pain medications that are given to your children. If we can keep them away from these drugs until the age of 18, chances are they won't start using them. Look for the symptoms and get help. We talked a little bit about the symptoms, the dropping in grades, hanging out with new friends, missing money. Do they have the risk factors? Major behavioral changes. Those are things to look for. Are there any other questions about heroin or anything we've talked about? Yes?
How long does it take after someone uses heroin for the first time to become addicted? What's the statistic on that?
We generally say that the first time you use heroin, you're addicted. Because what happens is you get that high and you will get physically sick. Heroin is psychologically and physiologically addictive. So in order to not feel that sickness, the physical pain that you will feel going through withdrawal, they want to use it again. So that's the general rule of thumb that we say. Yes? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. No, it crosses all boundaries. Did you ask if there was any? No. Nope, we're not seeing any preference like that. Nothing. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to talk about marijuana. We're not talking about medical marijuana at all. So that's totally separate from this, even though it was just passed in Pennsylvania earlier this week. Marijuana is not legal federally for recreational use, nor is it legal in Pennsylvania for recreational use. It's pretty safe, right? No, the marijuana that we have today is more potent than the marijuana that we used to have. It has many health side effects on the brain, on the heart, on the lungs. It is more harmful than cigarettes or alcohol. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I hear people say it's just like alcohol. It's not just like alcohol. The effects on the body are a lot worse than alcohol or cigarettes. In the grand scheme of things, what we've spoken about today, yes, this might be the least harmful as far as what we've spoken about, but it's also the most widely abused drug out there, and it is also still considered a gateway drug. What I mean by that is we interview a lot of people. Usually, unfortunately, we interview them after they're arrested, and they all talk about their drug use and how it started. I don't think I've ever interviewed somebody that just started using heroin one day. They all started with marijuana and worked their way up. So it is still a gateway drug. 1 in 15 high school seniors is smoking marijuana on a daily basis. Over the last 20 years, the potency of marijuana has tripled. So it's not the marijuana that we saw in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. It's a lot more potent. These are the different effects of marijuana. Your coordination. It impacts your motor skills, and that impact can last up to 24 hours. So that affects driving. That affects a lot of other things. It can cause throat cancer. There's 426 harmful chemicals in marijuana. The THC is what gives you the high, but there's 426 other chemicals in there that you're ingesting. Your mental capacity. Studies have shown that it actually drops the IQ. Prolonged use will actually drop your IQ. There's heart damage, and the tar content in marijuana is 1/3 greater than in that of cigarettes. Driving under the influence of marijuana, of a controlled substance, it can be alcohol, it can be drugs, comes with a penalty of 3 days to 6 months in prison. I don't think any of us want to go visit our kids in prison. A fine of $1,000 to $5,000. I don't know many high school kids that can afford to pay that. And 18 months suspended license. Now, while drunk driving, studies have shown that drunk driving has actually decreased in recent years because of all the publicity about it, drugged driving has actually increased. In 2013, which is the most recent data available, shows that 62% of drivers that were fatally injured had a drug, an illegal drug in their body. 35% of them had marijuana in their body, in their toxicology reports. Marijuana concentrate. This basically uses solvents to produce higher levels of THC. This is legal in states where recreational marijuana use is legal. So this is legal in places like Colorado. It's known as shatter, butter, honey, wax. It's way more potent and it's very dangerous to make. How do they use it? In the vaping cigarettes. And just so everyone knows, it doesn't smell like marijuana. If they're smoking it, you're not going to get that smell. Comes from the West Coast, head shops, internet. People from Colorado, recreational marijuana states, put it in the mail and they send it all across the country. This is what those look like, these marijuana concentrates. You shatter your oil, your dust, butter, your wax. Marijuana edibles. This is marijuana concentrate with that higher potency of THC. It's in the form of things that we eat and drink, cookies, candy, sodas. Again, comes from recreational marijuana states, the West Coast. What does it look like? That's a billboard. Let me go back. Hang on. That's a billboard that they put up in Colorado. Can you spot the pot? They put this up every Halloween in Colorado because that's exactly the form that these marijuana edibles come in. Looks just like candy. So what's little sibling doing? They're going into their brother or sister's bedroom. Oh, there's Swedish fish. Is it Swedish fish or is it pot? These are some other forms that it comes in. Pot tarts, packaged just like that. You can see on the bottom, OEOs. Those are sodas, some sort of gummy candy. In states where recreational marijuana use is legal, you could go into any convenience store and buy this. You just have to be 18 years old. So if they have Wawa in Colorado, you can go in and buy this. And I can guarantee my 10-year-old daughter would probably not notice that it said Pot Tart and not Pop Tart. So why does that matter? What's the harm, right? Young kids are ingesting it. In states where recreational marijuana use is legal, emergency room visits have gone through the roof because of this. And they have that extremely high level of THC, so the effects on the body are enormous. Again, it affects your motor control. And the effects last up to 24 hours. So what do we do now? Educate yourselves, which you're all doing right now. This is a great start. Educate your children. Now, we're not encouraging everybody to go home and browbeat your kids and ask them what they know about drugs and share with them everything you've just learned here in the last hour. But start a conversation. Ask them what they know. Share with them some of what you've learned. Be proactive and vigilant. Look, who are their friends? What are they doing? Ask for help. If you think that there's a problem, you have great resources in the Parkland School District. The county has amazing resources. There's resources online. And please monitor the social media. We see a ton of chatter over social media. When we seize telephones, we get warrants to go through the phones. It's unbelievable what we see on there. Different things, so monitor their Facebook, their WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, Kik, WhatsApp, whatever they're using, monitor it. Because you'll see different things on there. This is just some of the words that you might see. And if you don't necessarily know what it means, Google it. The Urban Dictionary is a wonderful resource. I still do it now. If I'm going through a phone and I don't know what the text message meant, never heard that term, and it'll sure let me know what it means. These are some different resources. I believe this is on one of the pamphlets outside that you can go to. Yes?
Let's say you have one of your kids telling you that a friend brought a brownie that has a party.
Mm-hmm.
Who you go to the principal or to you?
You probably want to go to the local police department at that point. And then they would know what to do. And if it got to that level, we would get involved. But I would say your local police department would be the best way to go. DEA Philadelphia has a Facebook page where they put up their trends and different things. If you like this page, it's not going to blow up your news feed. They only post things maybe that we feel the public should know. So if we see something interesting, something different, something that we feel parents should know or people in the general public should know, we might put it up there because things are changing all the time. We're seeing constant different things. The marijuana concentrate, the butter that we saw earlier, the shatter, that's all fairly new in this area. But this is where we'll post it. So it's a very helpful resource. And that email address, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, that email address is monitored every day. You can feel free to shoot an email in there, and somebody will get back to you. Someone will absolutely get back to you. Anyone have any questions? Yes?
So I'm pretty loud, so I think I'll be okay. So one of the things that I know is there's a lot of drug tests available in the market now, right? That you can buy through home drug testing. Is it appropriate or rare for the drug test your kids?
I would say that's probably a parental question. I would say yes, but I have a different background. Pat, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
I do, can I,
I would say you do what you have to do. Keep them safe.
just so this is on again, we're the DEA, we're a federal law enforcement agency, okay? We're like the FBI, we're a police agency, which means we have to operate within the confines of the Constitution, meaning we can't come into your house unless we get a search warrant, okay? But you know who doesn't? Yeah. Be parents. Be parents, okay? I grew up in a single-family household, in a single-parent household in New York City. I was scared to death of my mom. All right? It worked. It worked. It's hard to become a federal agent, okay? It's really hard to become a federal agent to pass that security clearance, okay? So be parents. That's the biggest thing. Test them as much as you want.
Anyone else? Yes.
Just so everybody can hear, she's asking, are there problem areas where kids do get drugs?
Locally, you mean? I mean, obviously, you go into an Allentown, downtown Bethlehem, Easton, it's going to be more obvious. But like we said, honestly, unfortunately, it's in the schools. It's in the neighborhoods. It's in every town. I can't say, is there a specific corner within the school district where the kids are selling them? That I don't know. But just know that it is available. It doesn't matter where you live. Honestly, I know most of us probably chose our house based on schools, based on where we thought we could raise our families, and unfortunately, it's everywhere. Anyone else? Yes?
As a parent, you said you have a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
What are like the three main things you do or will be doing with your own children?
I talk to them. My daughter's 10 and she has known about drugs probably since she's been in kindergarten. I have a son who's 7. They know about drugs. They know what to look for. I know their friends. I know their friends' parents. I think that's a big one. We're all very busy, but we're very involved. We have dinner together. I go to their sporting events. They don't go to anyone's house that I don't know. You know, their friends, the same thing. And I personally, my daughter knows it. She has her iPod. She can text or whatever. She's not allowed to have Instagram. She's asked me, she can't have any of those other social media things. I see all of her text messages. And honestly, she could tell me that, oh, privacy, this or that. You live in my house, I pay for that, there's no privacy. And I think that's the big one. It's just know what they're doing. That's for me personally, and talk to them. Have the conversations with them. Be open about it. Don't hide it. You know, if there's an overdose that you hear about in the school district, talk to them about it. It's actually a good way to start a conversation.
I have a brother who was 12, was given marijuana by a friend's parent. He's 48, and he's still addicted to drugs all these years.
Yep. And unfortunately, that's the statistic. So that's why we say early interventions, keep them off the drugs as long as possible, if at all. Yes? unfortunate, but it's true.
I agree that. My son was the same. He said it was the same thing. You can't sit with when you come to sit with a child's lap, it's going to form, but you know where they're going. I mean, we had Orthodox Street, now it's Bellevue. 3 dancers upstairs. 2 choir shops and 4 shops. But they were out the door, the parents upstairs, and the children up the front desk. Very nice thing. Yeah, just every parent should know that. It's really frightening, but it's good that everyone is here to hear.
Absolutely, thank you.
A range of children, like they range from like in the 23, 24-year-old on down, and then the youngest, of course, is 9th grade. Is there a difference, like, because do you have any recommendations on that?
As far as what? I'm sorry.
As far as like, like when you're talking about the drugs and the, I mean, I'm treating, like 21-year-olds are allowed to drink, obviously, that kind of stuff. Like you just kind of, like, I almost think my younger one, I kind of feel bad for him because he has to see something, the older ones certainly aren't using drugs, but they do drink, stuff like that. Like, is there any recommendation with that, or just kind of?
Again, the only thing I would say would be have the conversation. I don't know if you have any other.
Yeah, we actually have some of the literature in the back has information about how to talk to teenagers and young teenagers specifically. All right, rather than getting into that over here, but there is that. I know we ran out of some of the material. Everything that we gave out today is available on the DEA site. If you guys are interested in more literature, I can bring more up and send it to the principal and make it. But we do have stuff in there that helps you with some guidelines and suggestions about how to talk to younger children about it.
If I could add something quick to that as an administrator. Look, I think one of the things we do at times is we try to coddle younger kids. I think the more blunt you are, the better you are. I try to be as blunt and upfront as I can with middle school kids here. And I'm going to tell you, there's nothing that's going to supplant the communication piece between you and your children. I'll commend my wife to the nth degree. She does an outstanding job, and I think my kids would tell her anything that went on anywhere. And like I said, I had 2 daughters go through Parkland, and I have a son in 10th grade, and I know they wouldn't hold anything back from her. Dad tends to be maybe a little bit more of a heavy in the parenting role, but I know I'm going to find out exactly what they do because they're going to tell her to do it. Nothing will supplant the communication piece, though. You need to talk to your kids all the time. The more you know about them, the more they're going to want to share about what interests them. It's what I tell teachers to do here. The relationship piece in teaching is more vital than what the teachers know. Kids want to do something like an athlete wants to do something for a coach who motivates them to be better than they thought they could be. That's what I tell teachers to do here. The best coaches in the world weren't necessarily the best athletes, but they're the best people at motivating people to do things they didn't know they were capable of doing. That's what we need to do. I want to commend everybody for being here. It's a gorgeous day outside. I didn't get home from a board meeting last night till 10 o'clock at night. I'm going to have a late night tonight. I'm going to have a late night tomorrow. But you know what? It's important stuff for us to hear. I think we've gotten great questions. I'm not saying you can't ask more questions. You can. I'm just putting my piece on it. I think the communication piece is extremely vital. And I wouldn't necessarily mitigate a whole lot of stuff by age.
Another thing I just wanted to bring up was, you talked about your kids going to parties. I don't know how many people have a code word with their kids. I have one with my 10-year-old. She knows that if she calls me, now granted, she might be at a sleepover, I'm assuming she's not at the age yet, but you don't know, or she's at a party and something's going on. She can call me, and she can use that code word. Nobody knows that code word but my husband and I and her, and my son. There's no questions asked, I will come and I'll pick her up. She knows she doesn't have to be afraid to tell me what's going on once I get her. And I think that's very important. If your child's at a party and they call you, let them know it's okay to call you, and then you'll have a conversation about it. But if they're afraid to talk to you about it, they may not let you know. They may not call you to get them out of that situation. So that's just something that we do in our house, and that goes for anything just to keep them safe. Like if they're just at somebody's house and they're creeped out because there's a delusional, something else going on there, and they want to come home. They know they can call me. They don't have to be embarrassed because they're not saying, please come and get me, like I'm afraid. They use the code word, I come and get them. And there's no question. So that's just something that we do that might be helpful to others. There was another question?
There's some documentaries out there about heroin.
I'm sorry.
Me too, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Just a way to start the conversation with your kids for today's 420. And a lot of the middle school, high school kids, they know what 420 means to them from just in the world.
Right.
So ask your kids what it means, and they'll know. And if they don't know, they're going to ask. If they know, then ask them how they know, and that's a great way to start the conversation and find out what they know, what they've seen, who they know.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you don't want to know names, but you do want to know how much they've seen.
Does everybody know what 420? Well, it's today's date, and this is actually just a total coincidence that we're doing this today. It's National Pot Smoking Day. It's Hitler's birthday, and it's National Pot Smoking Day. It's also my nephew's birthday, but that's irrelevant. But that's what it is. So that is actually a fantastic segue, because if you have middle school and high schoolers, I guarantee they know what today is. Yes?
My son's 12, and I taped a documentary on heroin use, and it shares so much information that I'm almost afraid for him to watch it, but then I'm almost afraid for him not to see it.
Right.
So at least 12.
Just to quickly, she taped a documentary on heroin. It's extremely, I would say, explicit, if I could describe it for you. And she's asking whether she should or shouldn't show it. She feels like she should, but yet feels maybe it's too explicit.
I would say if you're with him, I would show it. I would show it to my 10-year-old and just allow her to ask me any questions, because it's a reality. You know, you're not showing them something that, you know, is a movie that's maybe they shouldn't be seeing, but it's a reality. And it's scary, it's inappropriate, because I guarantee I can imagine what's in there. But the earlier you start educating them, the better. So I would, and a lot of times things like that have a huge impact. I mean, I come home from work and my daughter wants to hear stories. She wants to hear different things like that go on. Or if I'm talking to my husband who happens to be a trooper and we're talking about something related to drugs, she wants to know. And she's like a sponge, and I'm just very honest with her. So I would say, yeah, I mean, there might be bad language or whatever, but they know not to use it. You know, that's just the bottom line.
Excuse me?
Yes.
That documentary, I know what that is, because I taped it. My kids are here tonight because my husband had to leave and I didn't want to miss it. But my older daughter hasn't watched it yet, but my younger two have. And my son is going to be 8 and my daughter is 10. And we sat there and watched it together, and we talked about it while we watched it.
That's great. That's great. That's great.
What is a recommendation for a student? I know my daughter, she's much older now, but she came home and she wanted to try to help someone she knew was using. Like, I know what I did, but what would be your recommendation to tell that friend of a friend what to tell that person? I guess that's the question. Like,
Well, I guess it would depend on what the problem was.
Okay.
We often say with heroin, a simple conversation is not going to fix the problem. Rehab is going to fix the problem, and depending on the age involved, you have to go to the parent, you know, of course, and if that's not a viable option, let's just say, I would start with the counselors at school and go that route. Is there somebody else?
What's being done now to actively combat all this synthetic stuff that's coming into the country from other countries? That seems to me like almost as scary or scarier than heroin, because they can just order it on the internet.
Absolutely.
And
right now, we are trying to control as many of the chemicals as possible. I don't know if you have more information on what we're doing to prevent it from coming in.
Just so everybody knows, I'm really into steps anyway.
Thank you. One of the biggest allies that we have is Charlie Dent, who's actually right from this area. He has sponsored a bill that was passed recently to schedule a number of the synthetic drugs. In order for the DEA to schedule a drug, we have to define it. Okay? Water is always going to be H2O, okay, from here to eternity. Heroin, the chemical name for heroin is diacetylmorphine. That's always going to stay the same. With synthetic drugs, they might be made from chemical A, B, and C. We'll schedule the synthetic comprised of A, B, and C, all right? At which point the lab operators make it from A, B, and D, and so on and so forth. There used to be about 120 chemicals used to make it. The library now is up to 48,000. So we're trying real hard to keep up with it, but it's been a real monumental task.
Yes.
I know in the schools, and this is more toward the principal, I know in the schools, we, in the beginning of the year, have your anti-bully campaigns. The kids, you know, get on board, signing, this is what we're gonna do. Have we seen the need for an increase of these types of things that the kids are being, kind of, maybe, I don't wanna say held accountable, but aware that, you know, in the same situation, this is your role, and
The program throughout the elementary, middle school, and high school, it's embedded within it. Within health classes, we have the DARE program in the elementary, we even have the DARE program in the middle schools now. And we have a resource officer teaching it. So it's something that it's embedded in what we teach all the time anyway. It's part of our guidance classes. It's something that we definitely talk about all the time. We might not have had a campaign like we did for the anti-bullying program that we kicked off 2 years ago, but we still embed it in there and talk about it all the time. So it is in there.
And I know that their campaign has changed. It's adjusted with the times, where it was very different when we were in school, what drugs they focused on, but they're growing with the changing times. They're starting to talk more about the stuff that is really affecting the kids, which is important.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim O'Neese, the high school principal. And I had a couple of things I wanted to share with you, but also an announcement. Last year, we brought Chris HEROIN, who's a former college star athlete and NBA player and recovering addict. He has his own program that he performs across the country. We packed 3,200 students in our gymnasium. You literally did hear pennies drop on occasion. It's a very powerful presentation. It was very impactful on the students. It always hits different students at different stages where they are in their lives. But Chris is coming back to the Valley, and there's an open presentation. It's going to be Thursday, May 12th at Nazareth, at the high school in the gymnasium. So at 7 p.m., you'll probably see that advertised in a newspaper if you haven't already, or you can go on the Nazareth High School webpage. As far as principals in the Valley, we've been communicating about this because it affects everyone and anyone. So we've been messaging out, and we've advertised that to different communities, and basically we'll be putting that out there for everyone to see. Also, a couple of things I want to mention. Some things we're seeing in some habitual forms. Someone asked where. Bottom line is anywhere to get drugs. But I will say that we're seeing students congregating in parks. Now, if you think about the Parkland School District, our area, Upper Mac, North Whitehall, South Whitehall, there's a lot of parks. But parks, if park becomes home to a student, to your son or daughter, park's a problem. So I would just kind of relay that and think about that, keep it on your radar. If your son or daughter is hanging out with someone who's always at the park, why? You know, and I know teenagers love their freedom, but be aware of what that is and what it looks like and what's going on there. And I love parks. I'm a hiker by nature. I would want my children to go to them. I don't mean that in any negative way. I would just say keep it on your radar. Second thing I would say is if the school, the middle schools would come to you and talk with you about your son or daughter in middle school, your radar should really be going off. Really be going off. So please, when we talk to the students that we're really trying to help at the high school level, most of the time, it started in 7th or 8th grade. They might have been really good at hiding it, or they might have been experimenting, but your summers between 7th and 8th, 8th to 9th, they're different children than they are during the school year because they have much more freedom. And that's a real sensitive time period. So I would just keep that out there and think about that a little bit. you don't want to be 3 years into this. You don't. It's really, really difficult. It moves to much more harder substances. It's like we're talking about tonight. And I would echo, be on their phone. Be on their phone. You can, I talk to parents, they're on their phone at 12 o'clock at night, because that's when the phone's out of their room. But everything goes through their phone. And, you know, we find out things through social media just by checking a Twitter account. It's amazing what you can find out, the conversations that are had out of that. And that's just one thing. So trust is earned. They'll learn it for you, or they'll showcase it. If they lose it, you know where to go to find out anything you need to know about them. So those are just a couple things that I would mention and share, and maybe I'll see you over there in Nazareth.
Are there any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, the district is pretty tough with different situations. There's possession and use or under the influence, that'd be one category. And typically that may be a lengthy suspension, but more so there's a counseling component to that we're going to have during that suspension period. There's going to be a drug and alcohol assessment interview that a student is going to go through. There's going to be recommendations that are provided from an agency to the family as to how the family should proceed coming out of that interview. There would be student support team participation mandated so that we can continue to follow up and check on progress of the student to see how successful they are in transitioning and at least supporting them. In terms of distributing drugs and moving drugs and things of that nature, now you're talking about much more of a serious progression of the offenses, which would include suspension and up to including expulsion from the school district. And I will say that hopefully no one's children are in that situation of distribution. Don't ever let your children, talk to them. They should never, ever have a brownie at school, okay? Especially if they really don't know where it's coming from. And I'm gonna leave it at that. But I hope you understand what I'm saying. That has, I would say, coming out of Colorado, become a thing to do. And it's not that we see it all the time in school, but we're hearing about it a lot. So if someone is distributing, the school district's really tough on it, and it may more than likely be an expulsion. And I do want to thank our administration for supporting us in that, so that those students are right back into the building and reaping business and hurting lives, hurting children.
Does the law step in with that?
Yes, we did definitely. We have a resource officer for both middle schools, and we have one at the high school.
I have a question on that, on the brownie assumption. So when our kids are younger, if the kid has lice, we get a letter at home saying that there's a lice problem in the school. So if there's a brownie concern, why isn't that communicated on a wider scale, if that is in fact true?
Because with lice, there's not a name that comes with it. So in this aspect of the epidemic that we have right now, should there be something implemented, particularly in the high school, if it's seen?
Typically when it's seen and we see the evidence of it and who it went to pretty quickly. So in terms of lice, that would be more of an overall health concern that would impact much larger people just from general contact as opposed to consumption of something like that. So the student does have an amount of privacy that we're obliged to uphold, and we do so, and yeah, there definitely is legal involvement whenever we find it. It is not when we feel like turning over to the police, it's whenever we find it.
And if that became like a major thing, like we had that Facebook page, and it got to our level, I mean, we do monitor the trends, we do look at different blogs, like I said, we're in contact with the community. we might put something like that up there if we found that, oh, in the Lehigh Valley, this is what we're now seeing in a lot of the high schools. That's something that we would put out there. We're constantly putting out different reports that can be disseminated to different agencies about different things that we're seeing. So I do strongly recommend, if you like that Facebook page, you might see different things like that that would affect your children coming across there.
What's that Facebook page called again?
Where is it? There it is. Oh, you can't read it. It's the drug trends in Pennsylvania and Delaware. Mm-hmm. There it is. And that's updated whenever, you know, we see that there's something important put on there. Anything else? I'm sorry.
She was sick. I'll go back.
If you have a student who's under the age of 18 who gets pulled over by the cops and he has marijuana on his person, so they were offered a program to go through which wiped that from the record, like, you know, however that works. Is ARD, okay. Is that a good program to have in place for them not to suffer the consequences?
Yes, because you don't, if it's a one-time offense, you certainly don't want that. Children do make bad decisions, teenagers make bad decisions, and they get that shot one time. You know, so if there is a second offense, they will still see it, so if there's a second offense, then they don't get offered that again. So if they made one error in judgment, we all have, you know, so I foresee it as a good solution. We are seeing Adderall and Ritalin definitely being abused. That might lead to another drug of abuse, may not necessarily make the leap to heroin, but we are definitely seeing that as an abuse. But that's also a stimulant where the oxys and all that, they're not, you know, they're pain medications, they're not stimulants, so, but it definitely would lead to something else if they're abusing it. Or they'd be at risk of something else down the road.